Trooper Cody with a World War II story, and like all good World War II stories, starts in World War One. So what people tend to lose track of, history. We forget history so quickly. You know, Poland used to be one of the primary horse breeding countries in the world. People think of Arabian horses, and you know, if you look on YouTube for Arabian horses, I think what you would find is you would find a lot of people in the Middle East, Arabs doing incredible tricks with Arab horses, and certainly in America, the videos about Arab horses in America, well, you can't keep track of them, there's so many of them. What people don't realise is that pre-World War I, Poland had the best purebred Arab horses in the world and was the world centre of Arab horse breeding. The best horses in the world, the best of the best. So the records show that in 1917 there were 5,000 purebred, prime, best of the very best Arab horses. 5,000. In 1918, November 1918, those 5,000 have been reduced to just 500. Shocking. How many of those were eaten because people were starving? Very sad, very sad. Anyway, what happens? The war's over, and so Poland starts again with this breeding program, the best of the best of the best. But then it all happens all over again. We're in 1938, the writing's on the wall. What is going to happen? Germany is going to invade Poland. They're really worried about this, so they take the prime, the very best of the Polish horses, the best breeding stallions and the best breeding mares, and they take them to a part of Poland that's as far away as possible from Germany, just in case something happens. This is to a place called Jano, near the Bug River, almost into Russia. 1939, we all know what happens. Blitzkrieg, Germany, into Poland, World War II, it's official, and the people that have these horses in Poland, near the Bug River, terrified as what is going to happen to their prime horses. Now, it's difficult here because there's about 5 other videos that come off, but you've got to remember the man with a moustache, the man with a toothbrush moustache, was very much into the past history, the Aryan history of Germany, and because of that, there were the knights, the German knights, and the German horses, and the German chargers, the cavalry in the SS and the German army is far bigger than anyone realises. The prestige of being in the German cavalry in World War II. So the Poles were really worried about what was going to happen to their horses. Suddenly, the German forces are only 150 miles from Janau, where there are 350 best of the best. I use that term too many times. Best of the best Arab mares and stallions. A couple of them are deemed to be the finest in the whole world. A decision is made, they have to save these horses. What they're going to do is they're going to head east, they're going to cross the Bug River, and then they're going to head into Romania. I have no idea how big World War II is going to escalate to. They're going to go into Romania. Why don't you come in for a bit of a cuddle? Do you want to come in for a bit of a cuddle? No? Okay. So they're going to go into Romania and hope they can find sanctuary for their horses there. Now, World War II, 1939, what have they got? No transport. There are no trains, there are no cars, there are no trucks. There is no transport. How are they going to move these 350 horses? They're going to have to walk them. Some of these horses are mares that have just given birth. Some of them are tiny foals that are going to struggle with the journey, but they have to set off on this journey. They put them into batches because they got no staff, so they have to put them into batches. Now, probably the finest mare of all of the horses is called Frederaka. So Frederaka has just given birth to a colt, Witz, W-I-T-E-Z. Apologies to Polish people with my appalling pronunciation. But she has just given birth to this colt. He is, again, seen as going... I'm at a loss for words for describing the quality of this colt. He's going to develop into such an amazing stallion. And he has two other relatives who are Stained Glass and Grand Slam. And these three young horses, males, are probably the three finest upcoming stallions in the world for breeding purposes. When you think that horses sell for tens of millions these days for stud, you know, that's the quality that these three were. So they decide to head off on foot, leading 350 prized horses to safety. They do not travel far before they come to the first main road, which they then discover is choked with refugees, carts, wheelbarrows, children, old people that are fleeing the German advance. The horses, who've lived a very sheltered life, looked after beyond belief how well they've been looked after, cared for, groomed, fed, now find themselves in amongst hordes of terrified people. Horses pick up fear phenomenally. It's how they survive. They pick up human fear. It's so easily. Can you imagine what it was like for these horses to be in this mass of terrified refugees? But of course it gets worse, because then the Luftwaffe is strafing, is attacking these convoys of refugees, which just adds to the terror and the mayhem. It is not long before one of these Luftwaffe attacks takes place, and they can't control the horses, and 80 of these prize horses, in panic, escape the grooms and gallop off into the dense nearby forest. The people in charge of this convoy of horses have to make a decision. Are they going to stop and try and find these 80 horses that are running loose in the forest? What hope have they got? What's going to happen to the other horses if they have to? So they reluctantly decide they are going to have to abandon these 80 horses. What is the true tragedy of this? Those three colts that I told you about, priceless colts, all three of them were part of the 80 that escaped off into the forest. How shocking. Horses are being lost, dying, having to be put down as they spend days trudging through these terrible circumstances till they come to the Bug River. They cross the river and they are now in Russia, and they turn and they head for Romania. They only travel about one day before they come to the first village, and when they get to that village, everybody is dead, the village is destroyed, the whole place is in a burning inferno, and what they realise is that the Russians are coming towards the Germans. So Barbarossa hasn't happened yet. Hitler hasn't invaded Russia yet, but the Russians are having a scorched earth policy as they come toward the Bug River into Poland. That is when they realise things are just as bad, if not worse, on the Russian side. What are they going to do? After losing 80 horses, after losing more on the journey, having to put some down, they then have to turn around to go back. They head back. They come to the Bug River. The bridge has been destroyed. They then have to travel Horses are exhausted. Horses are now dropping from exhaustion. Young colts and fillies simply cannot walk anymore. They just lie down. They can't. Their horses are being put down. After all this, they finally managed to find a reasonable spot on the bug where they can make the horses ford the river. They decide they're going to have to travel at night to try and avoid the attacks by the Germans and the Russians. The next disaster that befalls them is there are multiple strings of barbed wire across the road. They don't see it. They walk straight into it. The horses are terrified again, and very, very sadly, 8 prized horses are so entangled in the barbed wire, they have to be put down. At the end of it, of all the horses that set out, about 120 finally, exhausted, filthy, make it back to the Jano stables. And they decide they're just going to have to let fate take control. And sure enough, they're not there long when who arrives? Is it the Germans? Is it the Russians? Who would be better? It's the Russians. And when the Russians come, the Russians are not. They're not intelligent soldiers. In 2022, some invading Russian soldiers took Chernobyl. Those Russian soldiers took all the staff there hostage. Those Russian soldiers had never heard of the Chernobyl disaster. They didn't know what the building was. Ignorance through dictatorship. When those Russian soldiers came to the stables in Poland, they didn't look at the horses and go, wow, here are the prized horses of the world, the best Arabs breeding stock in the world. They went, hello breakfast, here's dinner. Every single horse that made that horrendous journey across the bug and into Russia and turned around and came back, and the barbed wire and the strafing and the being put down and the starvation and the hardship, they got back to the stable, were then all seized by the Russians, every single one of them, and was taken away. One version is that they went deep into the east for the Russians to create their own breeding program. And of course the other version, sadly, don't listen to this, Cody, the other version sadly is that they all were eaten. So there's a story, goes something like a bird falls out of a nest, and a little baby bird, and it falls on the ground, and it's middle of winter, it's freezing cold, and a rabbit comes along and it picks up the little bird and it drops the little bird in a freshly dropped mound of cow dung. The cow dung was fresh, it was warm, and the little bird snuggled down in the warm poo, and at least it survived. A bit later on, along comes a chicken, and it sees the little bird in the poo, and it says, oh, you poor thing, you don't want to be in the poo. And it lifts the bird out of the poo, and it puts it on the ground and says, there, I've got you out of the poo. And it's no sooner out of the poo than a fox comes along and eats the little bird. And the moral of that story is, just because somebody puts you in the shit doesn't mean they're a bad person. And just because they get you out of the shit doesn't mean that they're a good person. Well, having told you that the Russians took all of those horses were gone, let's just step back to the 80 that ran off in panic into the forest and couldn't be retrieved. What do you think happened to them? Well, the locals, the local peasants, the local farmers, they found them. And they immediately recognised them, and they knew what they were. And so what did they do? They got those horses and they whacked mud on them, and they whacked cow shit on them, and they made them look dishevelled, and they tangled their manes, and they made these Arab horses look diabolical. They looked like hobos, they looked like riffraff. Then the Germans got to Janau, and the Germans made it clear that they weren't interested in killing the horses or eating the horses. They wanted to create a fabulous breeding program, and they were going to set that stable back up better than it had ever been. And so what happened is those peasants, those ignorant Polish peasants, had recognised the horses, had disguised the horses, and then brought them back to that stable after the Russians had gone. And guess what? Remember me telling you about Wetzer, W-E-T-E-Z, and Stained Glass and Grand Slam, three of the greatest potential stallions in the whole breeding program. All three of them were saved by those peasants and brought back to start the German breeding program. Yes, it was a German breeding program, but thank God they were saved. So there you go. That's the story about the little bird. You know, they tried to run away from the Germans. All of those terrible things happened, but at least by trying to run away, the 80 went into the forest. Many of them were saved, including the three prize colts that went on to become so important in horse breeding. Of course, this story is far, far longer than this, because some of you might do some research on this, and then you might even find Operation Cowboy, or you might see the Disney movie with a great actor Robert Taylor, which of course is the mission by the US Army, US Cavalry during World War II to collaborate, if that's the right word, with certain German officers to save the cream of the Polish breeding horses, Polish/German. That isn't another video, it's a movie. But anyway, there's a quick story. 1939 Polish breeding program at Janau, J-A-N-O-W. If you want to see more fairly unusual, little known historic stories, you join us again sometime. Make sure you subscribe, click like, make a comment. Cheers, Cobbers.